Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I am your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, Robert York. Robert, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you so much for reaching out. Glad I could get you in the rotation. My season 4 took forever to film, so I'm like
hmm
feeling feel pretty good right now. I've released 2 episodes so far, and I
Yeah.
already you're my 22nd episode, so I'm like feeling good. Like trying to get ahead and stay ahead. So knock on wood, we can continue that trend. But thank you so much
Uh,
for being patient and coming on and chatting with us today. Thank you
oh,
so much.
anytime. Like I said, I'm on your dime. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I appreciate that. I had somebody that emailed me that did not understand that. I was like, this is
Mhm.
a free service? Like, it was very weird. I told people in my podcast group, I said, never send a podcaster, this type of email. It was really crazy. I usually don't get them. I usually get like super cool people that are super
Uh-huh.
patient. They're very rare. And I actually talked with a couple of podcasters about that. But just a little thing, because I always call this a journeyman's podcast. People that are just getting started.
Mhm.
Don't be that person that emailed me. Okay. And also send your links to
Mhm.
people. It's super helpful, or at least your book title, right?
Yeah.
So Robert, what has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Well, that was something that I was trying to think about when, I read the question. But for me, I think, and I would say most authors, it's a journey both of excitement and trepidation. It also has a lot of self-doubt in it. For me, anyway, it's like when I started wanting to write, it's like, what am I going to write? Where am I going to start? And, most people go through and read books on how to write books, but there's no books out there that tell you how to write your book.
That's
So
true. Yeah.
for me, um, when I wanted to start writing, I went through like back in 2014, 2015, I went through like a 2.5 year period and I read 200 books, mostly classics and, books that were turned into movies, like Peter Benchley and stuff, Jaws, because I wanted to see, I'm like, wow, this was a book first, and of course,
Yeah.
Go and all the rest of them. So that was an experience. And I was like, you know what? I'd really like to write my own book. It's just like, what genre did I want to start in? And coming from, a kid that grew up in the 80s, we had, horror films and really good, fantasy films. I mean, you had, Conan the Barbarian, Beastmaster, you had all of those. And I really liked, the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and of course Harry Potter. And I really felt comfortable in urban fantasy because um, I applaud people that can write, and create their own worlds. I mean, Tolkien is he's a god when it comes to that sort of thing. He
Yeah,
creates
yeah, yeah.
his own languages and whatnot. But for me, that was more of a comfort zone. So when I first started writing, I'd write a chapter or two and then I'd give it off to my wife and other members of my family, which I apologized in advance for torturing them, reading all of those first drafts.
Yeah.
And I think I went through maybe 6 or 7 drafts before I got something that I think it was my wife or my mother-in-law that said, you need to keep going. This is actually pretty good. And I'm grateful and that I had that support structure of people that could give me at least, critiques and say, this stinks. You need to start from square one, or this is a good,
Yeah.
I like this character, keep going with it. And then once I got into the whole writing phase, and like I was saying before, nobody teaches you there's no book out there that tells you how to write your own book. I would write everything in my phone into notes, and then I would transfer it into not pages, Word, in order to do any of
Mhm.
the corrections and send it off eventually to the editor. And I kind of had a leg up in that because I worked in the graphic arts field for about
Oh,
33 years.
nice.
So I
Yeah,
know
yeah.
about, formatting books and text and how you do this. And I also have a background in art. So that helped when I was wanting my covers created. It was one of those things, I wanted a specific color, a cover, and I found images that I wanted to use. And I'm like, well, I can't pirate them. So I contacted the artist. His name is Darren Horley, and he's in England. And I
Great
asked him,
artist.
hey, can I use this? And he was really awesome about it. He's like, no, you can't use those. But what I can do is I can manipulate them. And if you'd like, I could do your cover for you. So I got all the elements together, created them, sent them off to him, and he was the one that created my first cover. And it was just awesome. Of course, the one thing I can say to other authors is ask. The only thing somebody can say is no. And as long as you do it in a way where people are like, you're genuine, like, I'd really like to use you as this. Many people are busy, or you might be too small for them in regards to your audience and whatnot. But asking always helps. I mean, that's what I was taught when I was a kid. So I tend to ask more. I try not to be annoying about it, but, I ask. And I got in contact with a really good editor, Kim Bigelow. And then, luckily I had people, structures around our supports, people around me, Cheryl, who got me into author book signings and stuff like that, getting my promotional stuff going. Because being sort of like an introvert, it's very difficult for me to go out there and say, "Hey, how you doing? My name's Robert York. You want to buy my stuff?" And I think it's very. I always get upset when I'm like trying to pitch what I'm writing, because I'd rather give it away for free. Don't tell everybody that, but at the same time, you have to make money to make it, sort of worthwhile
Yeah.
and to keep you going. But once I got the first book done, and and sent it off to people, I found that the people that read that book, reviewers and readers and whatnot, saw that as I was writing, my writing got better from the first chapter to the end of the chapter. And then when I wrote my second book, that's when like my voice, if you will, came to fruition. So, but like I said before, it's the whole writing journey is there's a lot of highs and lows, pitfalls, and a lot of self-doubt. The self-doubt will never go away, but as in the book On Writing by Stephen King, it's like in order to be a writer, you have to read a lot and write a lot. So that's a good piece of advice for everyone, I think.
I think that makes total sense. I love your covers, by the way. So those
Thank you.
are super cool. When you emailed me, I just gotta let people know. When you email me, um, like please put the art because like a cover, like, and a lot of people don't do that. So like, and if I can't, then the second thing is if I can't, if I can't find you, like some people have names, like author names very similar to other people. So if I have to go through, like I had somebody email me a while back and I was like, hey, like, do you mind? I can't find you, right? I was like, do you mind sending me? Turns out they had an author name, pen name,
Mhm.
and didn't send it. So I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know who Matt Smith is, So I was like trying to do the work, and I was like, you know what? Like, I just don't have time in my busy life. Like, I'm about to like publish stuff too, and not to
Mhm.
be a jerk or anything, but I'm like, I need some help. So
Yeah.
when people at least put the title, I can put your name and the title in, and
Yeah.
easily find it. So, but I love seeing the art. Like, that's really for me what like gets me. So, like when I looked it up for your covers, I can't remember which way I did it because it was a while ago, but I was like, oh, these
Mhm.
are super cool. So yeah, those are like some of the things that I look for right away. I was an artist before a writer, so for me, like
Mhm.
that's like a really, really big deal. And those are super cool covers.
Well, thank
I
you.
just want people to take a look at the description real quick for your covers, because like so I think I've talked in here before, like I'm having to fix my novella covers. They're too military fantasy and not
Mhm.
urban fantasy. I have a prequel novella. I have a monster hunter who's a Marine. And this is going to make sense to the audience if you've been watching for a while. So if you take a look at like Dead Rain, for instance, I love how
Yeah.
you did the typography there.
Mhm.
That's like a spooky thing. Like my typography looks too military. So we looked at something that's not as cool as that, but kind of similar, like spooky,
Yeah.
and was really cool. So the art itself is cool, but I just want to show people like the typography is really cool. Your cover really, to me, matches the genre really well, but with what your character is doing here, on the cover, it instantly pulled me in. And then with just the cracks and stuff in the typography for Dead Rain,
Mhm.
um, the designer in me is like, oh my gosh, like it's so cool. And I love being able to, the whole point of a cover is to look at the typography at the
Mhm.
top and then to go down, right? So the last thing people should be left with is your name. And I like how your name, I can very clearly read it there. So I just wanted, this is a Journeyman's podcast. So I just want to point out to people, what do I look for as a podcaster or a reader? What am
Mhm.
I trying to do as an author? That type of cover is what I'm trying to do. The next thing
Yeah.
I look at is the blurb, which I did. Sounded awesome. I'm like, okay, I'm in. So I just want to point that out to people real quick because I
Well,
think
thank
that
you.
book in particular, yeah, Nightmares, great one too. I just was having trouble. Oh, there we go. Yeah, Relics. That was the first one I saw. saw actually, I was like, oh, this is super cool. I have
Mm,
like a angelic race of like yeah, like of beings like who are goodly in one of my fantasy series,
mhm.
and they have not some. I have like their antithesis, which I haven't
Yeah.
released yet, so I don't want to give it away. But they're both super cool, and the character
Mhm.
in the middle for relics really made me think of those characters and some other
Yeah.
characters that I loved in like Diablo 2 and stuff. So and then I love the creatures on the side too, so people gotta check that one out. So that was the first one I had actually seen. I was like, oh, this looks super cool. So all three together looked amazing. So I think everybody should
I
take a
appreciate
minute.
that.
Feel free to pause. Yeah, check out Robert's books there. Um, and I think it's just great also to always know how people, came up with their covers and, and things like that and who they found. So I definitely agree. I asked a guy, Tom Edwards, I was like, hey, I'm an urban fantasy. You haven't done urban fantasy before. He goes, but I'd like to. So I'm glad I asked, right? He normally does
Mhm.
sci-fi and does some sci-fi fantasy. He slowly started to do fantasy. So he was expanding. So I haven't released the cover yet because I'm not done with the book yet. But it was so cool to be like one of his first urban fantasy covers. But if, like you
Yeah.
said, if I hadn't have asked him, I'm like, oh, this guy only does fantasy or, mostly sci-fi or sci-fi fantasy. I would have been out a really good cover and he would have been out also a really good cover. Like the art looks amazing. So I definitely think you hit the nail right on the head there.
Yeah.
I know you talked about urban fantasy a little bit, but sometimes people have secret projects and stuff. So what genre or genres do you currently write in and why?
Well, as I said before, when I first started writing, I felt comfortable in well, fantasy, but urban fantasy is a subgenre of fantasy, romantasy and all that kind of stuff. Um, when it comes to the other genre I like to write in is horror. Like I said before, I grew up in the '80s, so you got Freddy Krueger on one hand,
Uh-huh.
Conan the Barbarian. So I think in those two genres, fantasy especially, there's so much room to create. I mean, most people go for elves and dwarves, and I think I kind of pigeonholed myself into that when I wrote it because I kind of wanted it to be familiar for people, being my first book in general. So I wanted people to be feel comfortable in it. But I'm actually got, and I know that it's not fantasy, but I'm hooked on Dungeon Crawler Carl. So
Oh, that's
Matt
amazing.
Dinneman, and it's like he's actually created. He both has real world stuff in it, but he also creates things. He pulls from Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. So I applaud everybody, and I'm blown away by the creativity of the indie authors that are out there. But for me, like I said, you know, even though I write in urban fantasy and I'm writing another story in horror, I also have a thread of comedy in it because
Oh, that's cool.
it doesn't matter what story it is, there's always an element of humor in everything.
Yeah.
And I kind of build that on all of my characters. Solomon Drake, you know, I wrote his point of view. It's first person, but I wanted it in a journalistic style, like you're reading his diary, his innermost thoughts, and you see that he's guy of mid 20s. He's a wizard. He's still hopelessly naive about a great many things, even though he's intelligent, he's well read. You can just see how his snarky comments. I mean, there's one that he has this issue with another character who's a vampire, and there's a line that I wrote. His the look that he gave me could have melted an iceberg. Too bad he wasn't on the Titanic the night it sank. That kind of stuff like that. Because I always felt that you can have the serious side, but you can intermix it with the comedy, and I've gotten really good responses in regard to that. But um, the next book I'm going after, the fourth book, is I'm having Black Moon will be out at the end of this year, which is the fourth book in the
Oh, cool.
series. And that one is I pulled it off. I was going to publish it, but then I pulled it back because after I read it a couple times, I wasn't happy with it. I felt like I phoned it in. So I'm like, I'm done, so I pulled it. I'm rewriting like 10 chapters and then I'm going to get it back out again. And then I'm writing another one, which is a horror, but we'll talk about that in a little bit when, when the time comes. But, I just feel comfortable in those genres. I mean, I can write dramatic things and I can write comedy things, but for some reason I enjoy writing in those genres. That's just, my own personal take.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. I do like a little bit of comedy, right? I think that's where
Mm.
Marvel has done a good job. It's where I actually really like the new Superman. I thought that they did a
Mhm.
good job of being hopeful and being serious, but also being funny at times.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's always a good
Well,
dose in there. So.
yeah, Superman's a character. I think that he's been, the character itself, I think, has been underutilized over the years. I
Oh
think
yeah.
there's so much more there for him instead of him being like, the George Reeves character on the 1950s or even,
Oh,
yeah, I mean, it's that way. But I think, you have this person, and I know we're getting off track a little bit, but you have this
oh, it's
person
okay.
that's an orphan that is taking care of a planet, and there's a lot of darkness on this planet. It's like, how does that person survive, mentally and emotionally? I mean, I want to see those type of movies and read those stories and stuff like that. So that's just me, you know.
Well, I think it makes total sense though, and because it's really we're just talking about character, right? Because my friends ask me like, "Why do you love Superman so much?" And then they're like, "Assume, right? It's the powers and stuff." And I love the speech that he gave Lex Luthor, right? Like,
Mhm.
because it really it's not the God part of him, right, or godly part, or the powers I always found interesting.
Mhm.
I found it interesting, like, like there's one comic, right, where he like a girl's gonna jump off, and Spider-Man has one too, but
Yeah.
they're both cancer patients or leukemia. I think one's cancer, one's leukemia.
Yeah.
So terminal diagnosis, and but they both take a minute to stop, right? And I love Superman's in particular, because the girl was based because he can see, right? X-ray vision, he can see she's not gonna make it, right?
Yeah.
And I think she's like 12 or something, right? But like, and then he goes to her funeral and stuff, right? And it's just like the fact that you have somebody that has godlike powers, and he says it in this little mini comic, like the fact that I couldn't save her,
Mhm.
like that's what sticks with him the most, right? And
Yeah.
like that kind of the humanity, I think, is that he's not human, but it's his humanity, I think, that's always been really interesting. Lois and Clark with Dean Cain. Sorry, everybody, I know Dean Cain right now, but like when he was in the show, I thought it was so cool because it's and Brandon Sanderson makes sense with these at his lectures too, as he says Lois and Clark was not a great show because of the Superman parts. Lois and Clark was a great show because it was like him being the human side, right? How is he interacting with Lois and those things? And I think those are always the coolest parts of like the comics that I read too, is not that he's fighting Doomsday, but how he is able to be human even when he's not human. And I actually really like that they brought that up in the movie. I think the character just had
Yeah.
more depth that way.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it made this godlike character who's supposed to be perfect, right? And showed his imperfection. I thought it was really cool. And I liked in the movie how they gave him like, he needed crypto to save him a couple times and stuff or whatever, right? Or the robots, those kind of
Uh,
things. I liked that aspect. Like he had to learn from failure too, which he does in a lot of the comics. So I think that
yeah.
was really cool. But
Well, I
speaking of
mean,
good
yeah,
characters, yeah.
yeah, the amount of we'll say literature that is in comic books. I mean, we're talking there's thousands of stories. It's
Yep.
difficult to see sometimes what they put on screen because it's like the one that I really love is, and we're talking about covers before, is Alex Ross. I love
Oh,
comic
I love Alex
covers
Ross.
and I love movie posters. That's kind of why I designed I came up with the concepts for each of my covers that way. Um,
Mm,
but Kingdom Come, I love the Superman in Kingdom Come because that's, you can see that, Kansas, and no spoilers here, but Kansas has been destroyed and he's sort of put himself in exile.
yeah.
And, it takes Wonder Woman to coax him back to become part of the world again and try and rein in the superheroes. And that was just, as it was a marvelous, graphic novel. I loved it. I still have it actually. And of course, you've got the Dark Knight Returns as well, which was one. I mean, when they did Batman versus Superman, I was like, we were watching it. And I was like, what did they do? They totally ruined it. That part is supposed to be in this other comic here. Why didn't they just make an older Batman? And it's like
Yeah.
go to that whole thing because it was a great graphic novel. I mean, it
Yeah.
was one of those ones that I loved comics before, but that brought me into the whole of writing,
Games, right?
the art.
Yep.
That became where it meshed for me. John Buscema was one of my most favorite, comic artists, and you had John Byrne, and then of course Alex Ross comes along. It's just I don't know. It just for me, there's just so much there and to draw on in order to create really good movies. And you're spending $250 million on a movie, make it good. That's just
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they take storylines, you're like, why out of all the story, you clearly didn't talk to a fan. That's what I say. So
yeah.
it gets interesting. But my favorite question on this podcast, and one I'm privileged to ask, is what is your series, The Chronicles of Solomon Drake, about, and how'd you come up with this idea?
Well, the series is about Solomon Drake, of course, who is he's a young wizard that is adopted by his mentor Barnabas Blackmane, and he works in Blackmane's magic and potion shop. How good this guy be if he's working in retail? But anyway, he's drawn
Retail
into
pro wizard, right?
exactly. So he's drawn into his adoptive father's secret life when a cob elf by the name of Tillender Duggins, appears in the back of the magic shop with a mysterious crystal. And that starts off a series of events where Solomon is drawn into a quest in order to find out what happened to all of the relics of King Arthur's reign. And in the second book, it's of course Dead Rain it's a continuation of it. It's everything is sort of continuation from the moment we know he's a wizard to begin with. It's just he's still he's kind of Barnabas has kind of kept him sort of in the dark about everything because of his as the story goes you'll learn more about him. But the second one is he is implicated in a wizard's death in New York City, and he's being investigated by both mortal police and the Blackguard, which is the police force of the Elder Council of the magical community. And while all that is going on, he's sending zombies are being sent against him in order to, number one, kill him and all that kind of stuff like that. And then the third one, he's being investigated by a online reporter from a magazine called The Modern Anomaly, Garrett Wells, and he has evidence that Solomon is a wizard, and unless he gives him an interview, he's going to expose him. And so he relents, and there's also a ancient demon that is threatening him and trying to kill him in his dreams. So, but the whole series is about just his experiences about him being thrust into this world, even though he was already in the world. His life is in danger through the whole thing, and he has to figure out who he is and where he came from, because his mother died in childbirth, but his father is off doing whatever he's doing, and he's slowly but surely getting pieces to the puzzle of his past. And as it goes on, which at the end, I'm hoping to have this in 7 books. 8 might be more likely, but 7 books is going to encapsulate everything at the end.
Oh, that's cool.
And how I came up with it, it was like, I think it was by chance. It took me over a year and a half to figure out what I was going to write about. And the one thing that started it was, in the book, I have these characters called, they're guarding gnomes, not garden gnomes, but guarding gnomes. And over the years, their name has been sort of changed. They're fierce warriors, they're only 6 inches tall, that sort of thing. And when they take up residence in someone's home or garden, they protect the home and garden. And that's what I came with. So there's one character that's in there, and his name is Earl, and he's a rotund garden gnome. And I was just sitting, toying. I wasn't really writing. I was just thinking about different stories. And I thought it was funny as heck as this garden gnome sitting there with a hot wing, eating it like an ear of corn, like it was ambrosia prepared by the gods. And that sort of kind of went from here to there, and then I pulled part of a story that I wrote with my eldest daughter Mackenzie when she was in school.
Yeah.
She had to write a fairy tale, and I'm like, well, what do you want to write about? A princess? She's like, no, I don't like princesses. So after we did some brainstorming, we ended up doing it of a little ogre called Spinnaker Vogt, and he's a this ogre that wants to be a baker, and he creates these tarts called yuckberry tarts. They look nasty, but they smell delicious, and they smell delicious and they taste delicious. And he goes out into the wide world to try and sell them. So I sort of took some of the elements out of that one and just expanded them, and Solomon Drake came along, and I'm like, I found the name, and I'm like, that's awesome. So then everything sort of just morphed, and there it is.
Cool. Well, speaking of world building, so what did you focus on the most when it came to world building for these books?
For me, it was plausibility. When I read Harry Potter, there was a lot of like hiding a townhome within a townhome, and the miniature
Right. Yeah.
and stuff.
Train station and a train station wall, like
Yeah, and it's like that. I mean, how does this going to work? So for me, it had to be anything that I write has to be plausible. There are so many different things within our own mythos. We look at different things like you have Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, you have the Bermuda Triangle. So I went and I read quite a few myths, legends, and tall tales and stuff like that, and I was like, what if there were we have our Earth now, but what if there was in another dimension exactly the same Earth, but in that world there are elves, goblins, dragons, and stuff. And years ago, which spawned our own mythology, there were these doorways that allowed
cool.
the creatures to go, and that's where we got Zeus, Apollo, dragons, all these kind of uh characters and stuff, leprechauns. And then over time, these doorways became fewer and fewer, and there's only a few around, like one in the Pacific Northwest or one in Tunguska. And when the Tunguska blast, people, had those, or different places in China, the Bermuda Triangle. So once I did that, it was like, okay, now we have like elves and fairies and gnomes. How do they exist without people seeing them? Because every now and then people will be sitting there and they'll see something darting in their vision. So I'm like, well, camouflage. So the fairies can take on, they look like birds, but when you get close to them or what, they actually turn into fairies. Or elves can turn into elks and whatnot, and camouflage. That way they're not seen as normally. So one of the lines is like, some creatures exist and hide in plain sight. And I wanted, when you read it, and I'm like, I've had an experience like that. Maybe, there is a snotling watching me right now. So I think that's where I think plausibility was where I was concentrating on the most. But I also wanted, like I said, urban fantasy. I wanted to incorporate, things like songs and artists and authors and stuff like that, and street names, so people can go, hey, I know where that is, or and things like that. So
it's cool. I just want everybody to know I did not steal Robert's idea. I just have a different dimension that all my things that are not from this planet come from. I did something similar from urban
Mhm.
fantasy. So I have like ogres, but they're not really, right? They're like from a different dimension. I call it the elsewhere, because you're like, oh, where are you from? You from here? You from there? No, from elsewhere.
Mhm.
So it's my elsewhere universe. So yeah, I always like that. I'm like, there's some things, right? Like octopi are just like so interesting, I think, right? Like scientists
Mhm.
are just kind of like, what the heck? Like, where did this thing come from? Like, it doesn't really make any sense. So I was like, oh, that's cool. So I had thought of that concept after seeing some research for them. So I thought, oh, that'd be really cool if you have, and like Ron R.R. Verdi actually got me really into or I'm a history teacher, so got me really
Mhm.
into about a year and a half ago, like the history of storytelling.
Yeah.
And so like I was like, so after him and I talked, I was like, oh, that's really cool. So And I had this idea previously, but I really liked it, and that's where my friend said something stupid to me, and I was like, "What if a bunch of ogres, like like he was reading like humorous urban fantasy, right? So he was reading somebody, and her book, it's like you have these ogres working in a diner, and
Mhm.
he gave me so he threw out some silly idea, and I was like, dang it, now I have to do these ogres who got stuck here. Works with my other series and stuff, but like, yeah, I was like, then now they can't go back to their other like realm and stuff.
Mhm.
But it like led me into this huge, and a lot of like, like Dune, and things like that of like spice, right? I always love that concept of like the
Mhm.
spice is like the piece of world building. So I came up with some
Yeah.
stuff for that. Like you can only hurt something from something from elsewhere, like kryptonite, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of your ancient artifacts and stuff in my world, like Excalibur and stuff, they were made with these pieces from elsewhere,
Uh-huh.
and mixed with silver, stuff like that. So I always love that concept though, because I've seen people do that and change and tweak it and just make some really, really cool stuff. But I love the origin of myths and where things
Mhm.
come from. So I always love to play with that myself, but I love to see what other people do when I, with their own stuff when I read it. So to me, that's just like such an interesting concept.
Mhm.
As a history teacher and just being somebody, it's like, oh, well, this, and I love when somebody poses something where I'm like, whoa, what if that's the truth? Like,
Oh
and
yeah. I mean,
I love that kind of thing.
yeah, history is always evolving because you might find a new manuscript or a journal or a tablet. I mean, it's for me, history is fascinating in and of itself, especially the Roman Empire period. And, finding out that, they had the same stuff that we have now. And it's just, in regards to, they had off ramps that had, like we have Bucky's now. They had their own interpretation of, they had fast food restaurants where people would go in and get soups on demand and stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
amazing that the only thing that's changed for us is technology. They more or less had the same, wants and needs and, things that they had to deal with. Oh, the tire broke on the wagon. We're going to have to get that fixed. That's the thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's always interesting too. I talked about this a couple authors, probably previously now, because they'll probably be published by the time we record this, but
Mm.
back in the fall. But it's interesting where like there's certain things like people ask me like, how do you figure out what to write? I had TikTok I keep talking about that popped up, and they asked the question, what if the Aztec Empire was so bloody, and so bloodthirsty, was not because they were sacrificing to the gods, but because they were ran by vampires. And I was like, why in the heck did that person put that on TikTok? Because now I have to write about it. So that's where one of my urban fantasy heroes is going to come from for her series. She's a vampire huntress. Like she's gonna hunt them down, and be like a female better Van Helsing.
Yeah.
Alexandra's her name. So yeah, I was like, God, that's so cool. And that's what she's gonna do. She comes from an
Right? Sounds interesting.
ancient line of vampire hunters. So
Mhm.
she's gonna coincide with my ex-Marine turned monster hunter Nathaniel Wither, and then I got a
Uh-huh.
Jade Sentinel as like a monk character. My friends always want me to write martial arts, but I like urban fantasy and fantasy and stuff, and
Yeah.
it's like I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, maybe one day I'll do like a progression fantasy, but for
Well,
me, urban fantasy is
you
fun. So
incorporate like I mean, I was always fascinated by the Last Airbender, the
oh
animated
yeah,
series.
yeah, yeah,
Not any of
yeah.
the
Great
movies or
show.
TV shows, but the last cartoon where they took martial arts and they turned it into like magic
Yeah,
system and whatnot. Which
yeah,
I mean, like
yeah,
that's I mean, so you can incorporate into an urban fantasy realm, martial arts if you wish. I mean, that's just
yeah, yeah.
suggestion.
Well, I was thinking about it, I was like, it'd be cool to have like a because I think Jade powers are cool. I always see that, when someone lights up like Jade and stuff. So it's like, oh, it'd be really cool to have somebody who has like a Jade power. And then I was like, the Jade guard. I was like, oh no, the Jade Sentinel sounds awesome. So,
Uh-huh.
and I have it where it's like great great grandkids. So it's like every three kind of thing. And yeah, it's like a funny joke because the that character, he's like I just thought my great grandfather was super old. Turns out he's got powers, and then once he like passes away, it goes to him, right? And they have to like protect our realm from
Mm.
the elsewhere and stuff. So, but I'm gonna do like an Avenger style thing. But yeah, I think it's just like fun to. I love urban fantasy. I didn't discover urban fantasy till right when I met my wife. Actually, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before I met her, I started to
Mhm.
read Iron Druid Chronicles by Kevin Hearn. I just like
Uh,
flew through them, and then I just
yeah.
started reading urban fantasy a ton. I was like, I want to do this. Like I was writing fantasy, I was writing sci-fi, but I was like, I want to write urban fantasy. So now it's like one of my big loves. But because of the things we're talking about, though, it's fun to take those little things
Hmm.
and tweak them. So I always think of like because he had Kevin Hearn had like the Roman Empire was ran by vampires. And
Hmm.
so that's why they were. And then when they switched to Christianity, it wasn't that was the Christians that wanted the Druids gone. It was the vampires because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's so cool. So there's just so many cool themes, I think, in urban fantasy.
Oh yeah.
Uh, so speaking of characters, though, like Solomon, uh, can you explain to us how you create characters that matter to your audience?
Well, selfishly, I make characters that appeal to me.
I
Um,
think that's perfect. I think that's a
yeah,
great answer.
and I mean, I'm not in. It's kind of funny, and I'm not writing stories for other people. I'm writing them for myself because after I read books, it's like, there's something missing. It's like when you go to a restaurant and you eat like a really nice pizza, and it's like it was good pizza, but there was something missing.
Yeah,
Maybe a beer or a Coke or whatever it is.
yeah.
For me, I've always been a fan of like silent movies, Buster
Mm.
Keaton,
Oh yeah.
Charlie Chaplin. I also been a fan of the great comedians, Groucho Marx, and
Oh, yeah.
all the ones that are out there, the Three Stooges and whatnot. I don't know if you call them great comedians, but
Oh,
I
I
love
think so for
character
sure.
actors like Rowan Atkinson and Mr. Bean. If you can tell a story without using any words, I think that is a master class in both acting and storytelling.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I mean, you have Mr. Bean. I think he only says one word, and it's Bean. Whenever he's like, being introduced, and he just sits there and he just, this. We all do it, but we're not aware of what we do. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but when I write characters, it's like for Solomon, the first thing that came to me was his name, and for some reason it just sounded good, Solomon Drake. I'm like, what do
Yeah, yeah.
I want? Do I want him to make this a grizzled veteran that's scarred and stuff, or do I want to go to the other spectrum and have him young and be this? And I'm like, what would be the best? Because it's like most everyone, like I read a lot of zombie novels and stuff, post-apocalyptic, and the protagonist is always somebody that was in the military. And I'm like, I
Oh
want
yeah.
somebody that just is like, he comes out with a frying pan and he's like, he deals with the world and he sort of like bungles his way upon it. And eventually, like, he's surviving, but you have all these people that are experienced in warfare who aren't, and it's just, for some reason, it's like, I always like those stories that weren't mainstream, like, and for some reason I can't think of it, but it'll come to me when I play. But it's the plot of it is that this guy wakes up and he doesn't know what's going on and he has to keep writing things on himself, tattooing things on
Oh, that's
himself,
nice.
like check the closet or something like that. So he goes and checks the closet and there's a guy tied up in there, beaten up, and he has no short-term memory. And it wasn't like a blockbuster film. I think it was released to video or DVD back in the day, but it was such a great movie. And I'm like, now I can't think of it, and I feel bad now.
We'll put it in the description. It's fine.
Yeah, I'll come up with it later. But um, but characters to me there have to be something in the characters when I write them that makes me either want to care about them or expect something from them. I think, when you look at characters, there's people that, root for the underdog or they want the empire to win.
Yeah.
Because they got, better clothing or something like that. And I think the movie Dumb and Dumber. At the end of the movie, Lloyd and Harry are like walking down the street after everything is done with, and a bus pulls up, and I think it's the Hawaiian Tropic bikini bus or whatever it is. And
Oh yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
girls get off and go, "Hey, we're looking for a couple of guys." And Harry is like, if you go down the road a little bit, you'll find guys there. And they look very perplexed, get back on. And Lloyd's like, "You idiot, what have you done?" And he goes back and he's like, "Stop, stop, stop." And you think he's going to get on there,
yeah.
but he's like, "You need to go back that way." And in an interview, Jim Carrey said there was no way that Lloyd and Harry were going to get on that bus. And had they gotten on that bus, it would have totally tanked the characters that they were, because they were totally
Yeah.
oblivious. And of course, Dumb and
Yeah.
Dumber.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
that's kind of what I do when I write characters. It's like, if I have an evil character, there's always like they have that good moment of, like picking a kid up, brushing it off, but then they pop the balloon as they walk away. You want that closure, as a villain, and you want a good person to be, even though he's tempted, he's always going to take, even though it's the most arduous path he's going to take it anyway, and he's going to take it. He's never going to take the easy way. So I think when I create characters, I don't know, I just want to see characters that are both have depth, and in some aspects you have characters that can have change. I mean, there was, as we before we were saying, I was reading that question that you sent me, and I was like, it's like if you had a character, I mean, people like Hannibal Lecter, and he's well read and he's a psychiatrist and stuff like that, but at the same time he likes to eat people, and no one saw that coming. But if you had like, a librarian that was, Miss McGillicuddy that, makes doilies and, volunteers at the hospital, but she ends up killing people by dusting the pages of her books with arsenic. You didn't see that coming either. So it's like, you always want that, is this possible or that possible and stuff like that. So if
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
made any sense.
No, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I always ask this question, and then I had somebody reverse it on me a while back. So
Mhm.
uh, I'm still kind of I'm still kind of thinking about it, I guess.
Right.
But I like what you said though earlier, like the first thing you said in particular, because you said you write characters that you find interesting.
Yeah.
And I really think that's the main thing, because if you're writing characters that don't find interesting, you're not going to find it interesting, and it's not going to be good. So no one's going to want to read it for the
Yeah.
most part, right? Maybe some people do just because of the genre, maybe just something cool world building. But in terms of character development, right? Like I've had more people tell me that they want good characters over good story or world building.
Well, yeah,
And
because you want to see where they'll go. I mean, I was
yeah.
just talking about Dungeon Crawler Carl and
Oh yeah. Oh
Princess
man. That
Posse.
first book. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And you have the Princess Posse, but you have Princess Donut, and her character development from the beginning to where she is now is just astonishing. It's like, and I'm not spoiling anything. I'm just saying it's like read the book so you understand what I'm talking about. But in even Carl, it's like, he started out, it's like, oh my God, this is what I'm having to deal with now. And now after I'm just finished the seventh book, so I'm waiting for the next one.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a lot of expectations when I started reading it, but after I got into it, it's like, oh my God, this is good. It's
Yeah.
like this is one I want to find out what happens, and you can go on from there. And I think that's for me. It's like when I get a book, and especially series, it's like you want to find out, and then you get to a book, it's like, why did that have to happen now? You're totally messing everything up. But like the Dresden Files, I think there's like 17 in the Dresden Files now, and I haven't picked up the new one yet. But it
I'm
things
on 11,
and
right? I'm on Ghost Story actually right now.
yeah,
Just about to start it.
it's not a bad one. I started in the middle of the series when I started reading it. Some people start at Stormfront, and they're like, this kind of stinks.
Yeah.
But if you
I like Stormfront. I don't get it. I don't
yeah.
get the hate for Stormfront. I just told my friend, I was like, this is what most people say. He goes, no, and he's like me with urban fantasy in particular. He wants to go in order. So he's like, dude, I thought it was really good. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, that's just what people say. I'm like, out of the other ones, I think it's, one of my least favorite ones, for
Mhm.
sure. But I still thought it was a great book. So I don't know. I hear that a lot, and I always find it really interesting. But
Yeah. I mean, for me, it wasn't this. I mean, I'm glad I started in the middle, because if I'd have started at Stormfront, I probably wouldn't have gone to uh, the second book. And I thought it didn't get good until the third book. But
well,
that's
that
my own
third book
personal
though.
observation.
That third book was, man, it's still one of my favorite books.
Mhm.
That's Summer Rights, right? Or I
The
forget,
Summer
but yeah,
Night, I believe it is.
yeah, Summer Night. That
Yeah.
I absolutely love like John Carpenter and stuff, and yeah, I mean, but that was just totally a different. Even though we started it, it was totally different. So that's like
Yeah.
still one of my favorite books of all time. But I do think it's hard with the Dresden Files, just if people are listening. Personally, I find it hard to like, because like books 1 through like 8 are very like similar, right? In terms of like, here's the case, you figure out who done it, but then once you get to like really like, well, I guess like probably like yeah, like 8 or 9, it starts to shift completely into this larger
Well,
world building
once
thing.
once
It's a totally different
yeah,
feel. Yeah, which I
without
like.
any
Oh, sorry.
spoilers, it's like once Mab gets into the picture, I think that's when it becomes
Yeah,
more, he's going to have to, what's he going to do? Is he going to become this or is he going to become that? So
yeah,
that's I think for me, that's where it got sort of exciting and interesting. But you know,
yeah. No, I totally agree. I've loved all of them. Yeah, I worry about Ghost Story. I just kept ripping through recently. Like I did a book and then that was my palate cleanser. Uh and I just already know it's like it's the type like from the blurb personally, like it's the type of story I struggle with. And I've had other ones where they've done like a similar thing for the premise, so I'm kind of trying to gut myself. I'm kind of feeling like for myself it's going to be like I hate to say it, but like the middle of the wheel of time. So yeah, so I'm like
yeah.
trying. But I do have the Audible though, which is nice. So I usually do 50-50. I might do like 60
You
40 or something
might
like
you
that.
might want to do the audio book on that one because I read it and it like you were saying it was difficult for me to get through it because it was different from the rest of the books,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
of
yeah.
what happened in the previous one and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
did get through it.
I'm glad I know myself as a reader just to be like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to. Audible has saved me. It's got
Yeah.
there's some books where I'm like, oh, I definitely enjoyed it by doing some of the Audible, and
Yeah.
it's got me through the tough parts. But yeah,
And
I
listening
think
does
that's cool.
count as reading. I'm sorry, people.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say each to their own, right? I have people that do 100%. I have people that don't count. I'm like, whatever. I'm like, I just want to enjoy a book. I'm a dad and I'm
Yeah.
busy. Yeah. I'm like, I still like the reading aspect, but I do like Dungeon Crawler Carl is a great one. Like just amazing narration. I
Mm,
think the Stormlight Archives, amazing narration. So
yeah.
there's times where I'm like in the mood for something different. So yeah, I think each to their own. Whatever you want to do it as long as you're
Yeah.
absorbing stuff and
When you're talking about narration,
trying to
I,
grow.
I lucked out and got a really good narrator, Connor Brannigan. He narrated my
Oh, cool.
first two books. And, once I finished the fourth one, I want him to do both the third and the
Oh,
fourth
nice.
one at the same time. So, but
Oh, that's awesome.
I really like, like it was one of those things. I had nearly 60 people audition and, out of them, he was the one that's like, that's the person I want to see, read as Solomon. So,
Yeah. That's cool. I'm gonna check that out because I'm trying to find somebody once I finish. I'm trying to pre-plan, so
mhm.
we're gonna try and like run a Kickstarter for some of it or something like that. But I'm always looking for audio narrators, so I gotta find the perfect like voice in my opinion that's like in my head. So I think that makes total sense. I know we're winding down on time here, but I want to make sure that we get a couple of these answered, like because I think I really want to hear what you have to say for 6 personally, and 7. So, how do you create unique abilities and magic systems within this series and these books?
Well, for me, I wanted, like I was saying earlier, I wanted to be kind of something that people were familiar with. So you had wands, hand
Mm.
magic,
Oh,
staves, and
cool.
stuff like
Yeah.
potions and charms and whatnot. But I had to go back to that plausibility thing. How does magic, how do certain people have magic and other people don't?
Oh,
So I had to go back and read biology. So I'm like, okay, so people that can wield magic have more neurons in their brain, up to 6 to 8 times more neurons. So in order for them to be able to handle the magic, and then I was like, well, if I'm going to do that, then there are other people in the world that can wield magic, but not to the degree that a wizard can. Like Michael Jordan could be considered a wizard because he's just awesome at playing basketball. Or you have, cooks and, writers and, even politicians to some, that are able to sway people and whatnot. You can say those to a lesser degree can wield magic, but not to the degree that you have wizards that have 6 to 8 times the amount of neurons in their brains, like Solomon can. So they can actually pull energy in from the world around them and store it like a battery and then release it. And the reason that they use wands, rings, bracelets, staves, and charms is so they can channel it. It's like a nozzle on a pressure washer. So
Yeah.
for me, I mean, that was the one, Harry Potter is like one of those wonderful stories that have everything that's in it. And then, of course, you have Lord of the Rings. And then there's other ones that I've obviously enjoyed Mortal Kombat, but the martial arts
Oh yeah.
they're using the martial arts in order to use their magic and stuff like that,
Yeah.
transformation and stuff like that. So I wanted it to be plausible, but I also wanted it to be familiar. So I wouldn't say I cheated a little bit, but I definitely went back and I guess you could say I took the easy way out in that an aspect of it because, you know, writing your first novel, it's like you want people to be interested in it. And there are some indie authors out there that create these amazing systems, like, where spirits are imbued into people's beings, which give them the ability to wield magic. And it's like, I couldn't even think of things like that. And this is amazing. But I wanted it so people like, I want to get into the character. Oh, and they do magic, that sort of thing. So I wanted the world to
Yeah, yeah.
interesting enough that people were brought in by the characters and for the urban fantasy aspect of it and say, oh, this is a familiar thing, but it kind of is a little bit plausible to me.
I think it makes total sense. I loved when Brandon Sanderson came on the scene and,
Mm-hmm.
started this whole thing because it made you think differently, right? But now
Yeah.
I feel like everybody feels you have to have a unique magic system. And I'm a person where I'm like at a point where I'm like, I just want good characters. I want some cool magic or some cool magic items. Like maybe it's a cool power, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Nightcrawler and X2, right? The White House scene where he's just popping in and out. How
Mm-hmm.
they used his one ability, right, that you don't think is that big of a deal, and how they were able to utilize it in that scene. You're like,
Yeah.
holy crap, that made you think completely different about this skinny little dude, right? Who
Mm-hmm.
has an accent and used to work for the circus, but you're
Yeah.
like, holy crap, he might be. I feel like that power level in my mind for him totally went up,
Yeah.
compared to what he was in the cartoon. He was kind of tropey in the cartoon. I loved how they turned him
Mm-hmm.
into an actual character, but I loved how they used that power, which most people like, yeah, I teleport, but like you can't go that far, right? Because he has to go within sight. And I was like, man,
Mm-hmm.
what a way to use that and his acrobatic ability to make it really cool. So for me, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't really care how it works. You know what I mean? If it's cool and it's interesting and your characters are, I'll read it. But like I think
Yeah.
now we're getting a little too magic system heavy, if that makes sense. I don't really care. Forgotten Realms, I know how it works because I played all the games and stuff, like the video games,
Mm-hmm.
Baldur's Gate and stuff like that, but I don't care, right? When I'm reading a book and a character does something, I'm like, cool, they can do it. Is it a cool power? Sweet, let's move on, So
Yeah.
I think some people put too much stock in it nowadays, but if you have something that's cool, that's great. But sometimes I think people get stuck. I have to create a cool magic system. I don't. I'm like, I just like tell you what happens, through the
Yeah.
story. And if you like it, cool. If you don't, okay. Like go read Brandon Sanderson. He'll tell you exactly how it works. I don't do that. So again, I think, each to their own for
Yeah.
reading and for writing, but I think that makes total sense. But I like how I just always like to point out though, right? Like you and I are different. Like you want the realism. Like I still think there should be a reason for things because I think it's just cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like for you, I think that totally works. And I like that it works for you because then as a reader, when I read your stuff, that's going to show through, And like you
Yeah.
said, right? You might order a different pizza, right? I like pepperoni from one place here, another place, it's okay, right? Like it's
Yeah.
good, but it's not as good as over here. So I go to different
Exactly.
people, yeah, for different things. So I think that like makes total sense. So, but I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a great answer. Now, if you had to fight any of your characters, creatures, monsters, really anybody that you've written, which one would be the hardest fight and why?
Well, I was thinking about this question as well. As I borrowed a character Frankenstein from Mary Shelley's novel. At the end, he paddles away to his demise and whatnot. So I picked up there, but I'm like, that wouldn't be fair because he's not my character. I didn't create him. I'm just the only thing that's mine is the personality I put into him when I wrote him into the book. But I think in the second novel, Dead Rain, there's a character, Detective Sergeant Molly Barnes, who's tough as nails and swears like a truck driving sailor and stuff like that. She's the kind of person that once she gets on a case, she doesn't stop until that person is in jail. She's relentless. And even if you fought her, you'd have to, beat the ever living crap out of her for her to stop.
Mhm.
She has a lot of insecurities, but at the same time, she's very determined. So I wouldn't want somebody like that on my trail. So Molly Barnes would probably be the one that I would be most afraid to fight. Not so much because she's strong, but you when you have somebody that's relentless and won't let things go, I think even if
Yeah,
you were going up against their Incredible Hulk, I wouldn't want to go up against somebody that just won't let things go and just wants you dead and will do everything they can or wants you in jail and stuff like that. That's the kind of power I think it frightens most people. It does definitely frightens me, you know, um but I think she would be the one that I would have the most difficulty with and not wanting to face in combat or she's also extremely quick-witted too, so I wouldn't want to match wits with her either. So, you know, I would say her.
yeah. That's a good answer. That sounds awesome. I love characters like that. So, but I always think that's a good question because I think it gets us into thinking, more about your characters, gets us to
Mhm.
know that a little bit more. Maybe people think that's really cool and she's a cool character and want to, buy the book to check it out. Who knows, right? We can only try.
Mhm.
But that sounds really cool. I love characters like that. I
Yeah.
know we're on our last question. Do you have any news, updates, current projects, anything like that you can share with us before we head out for the day?
Well, I know you got to get out of there, but book 4 is going to be released in December, Black Moon. Like I said, I'm putting the finishing touches on that one. And then the other one that I was talking about, the horror novel, is
Oh,
a is a harken back to the 80s. It's a cross between, the Griswolds meet Alien.
that's awesome.
They're on a family vacation heading to the Yellowstone National Park, and they end up in a town that's a few miles away from a secret government facility that's housing a dangerous alien that
That's
escapes.
cool.
So I'll leave it there, but it's called Vacation of the Damned because I wanted
Oh, that's
a little
cool.
campiness into there too as well.
I
So
like that.
that one I'm looking to get, release earlier next year.
Oh, that's super cool. Well, that sounds awesome. I've always loved, like, speaking of comedy, I love the movie Paul, where he like escapes with
Oh, that was
uh
awesome.
yeah, it's such a good movie. I actually have a cool like comedic like sci-fi short story I want to like finish. You don't
Well,
know it's
Shaun of
like
the Damned was awesome as well too.
yeah, Hot Fuzz was great. They're just great. I love those guys. Yeah, they're just amazing at what they do. Well, I thought that sounds awesome. Good luck with that. Let me know in the future.
Thank you.
If we could do anything for you.
Yeah,
I'm doing pre-recorded episodes now, but we are doing I'm doing some lives and just creator chats and stuff like that in the spring.
yeah.
So even after this interview, we want to come back on and chat or whatever, we can do another one. That way, and I'll throw it up right away. I'm gonna do some stuff like that in the spring, early winter and spring. But I want to remind everybody you can check out Robert's link, all the links in the description, anywhere where you're watching or listening to this podcast. I actually have. I have relics actually on my 2026 reading list. So I'm doing like a part one, part two video because it's a
Mhm.
lot of books. Uh, excuse me. So everybody check that out. And that'll be out January 1st, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please check that out. Robert, I'll send that to you. I talk about Robert's book, why it's on my list, why I'm excited to read it, that kind of thing. I'll do a review video after that for the year on why I enjoyed it, those kind of things, and what I enjoyed about it. So make sure you guys check that out. I want to make sure we're reviewing everybody's products. So if you have anything from Robert, please make sure that once you're done, you're reviewing them, whether it's audiobook, physical, Kindle, that kind of thing. Helps not just Robert out, but everybody who's part of his crew and his process.
Mhm.
So it really helps everybody. Robert, thank you so much for coming on. This was great. Can't wait to check out the books. All three seem up my alley. The other one sounds really cool too, Vacation of the Dam. So I love campiness and always love family vacation, all of them. So I'm definitely there for it. But yeah, if there's anything else we can do in the meantime, just let me know and we'll get it done for you. But other than that, my friend, I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thanks. You have a good one and take care.
Yeah, you too. I'll see you later.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.